We are constantly inundated with information. A lot of it can be really helpful. A lot of it, maybe not so much, especially when you're on social media. And today I want to talk a little bit about that and do a little social experiment. Welcome, I'm Peggy Oliveira. Thank you for joining me. On my YouTube channel, I share a lot of short videos for YouTube Shorts, and the majority of them are little 50 to 60-second clips of longer form videos, and I always share a link to the longer video. But one of the things that happens when we hear just a clip of something is that we're going to obviously miss the full context, right? And that happens across the board, no matter who we are, no matter what the clip is of. We're missing some context. And because of that, there are people who will comment on the YouTube Shorts and clearly haven't watched the full video. And that's not a judgment about it or anything. It's just the reality of it. And so I see that happen quite often. One of the things that I do, and this is maybe part of the vicarious trauma that I've experienced after doing this work for over 20 years. But one of the things that I do when I'm looking at anything that is mental health or trauma related is I'm watching, I'm listening, I'm reading through the lens of how might survivors or how might people take this? What about this could they internalize in a way that could affect them in a negative way? And I certainly don't expect, nor should anybody really view everything in the world that way. But that is the reality. And part of that is on my comments in particular, because I feel a sense of responsibility of what is there that people might experience. So, because sometimes there's comments that are left that are somebody sharing their own personal experience or sharing, what was helpful to them, that isn't necessarily something that I would recommend and has the potential to be actually harmful or something like that. And so I will sometimes comment back, just kind of reiterating the reality that everybody is different or something along those lines. But there was a comment recently that brought up a couple of different things for me. And I want to read it to you. And as you listen, I want you to, for the social experiment, I want you to just notice what comes up. So any sort of physical sensation that comes up, any thoughts that go through your mind, any memories that come up, any belief or fear or shame that it reinforces, any sense of empowerment maybe that it brings up for you. I certainly don't expect you to have any specific reaction to this. It's not right or wrong. It is just really wanting your feedback, because I know sometimes I can overthink things a little bit. And on the other side, I'm going to talk a little bit about the idea behind this comment, and then some ways to really think about the content that you are consuming and ultimately internalizing. So I'm going to read it just as it's written, because I don't want to fix anything and I don't want to switch any words or anything like that, because potentially there could be some bias in it. So I'm going to try to read it exactly as it is, and if I do make a mistake, I will acknowledge that that was my error. So again, just notice, and then when I'm done, maybe even pause and just give yourself a moment to recognize what's present or what's coming up for you. Maybe even make a few notes. Oh, this was on a clip of a longer video of how, I don't remember the title of the video, but how toxic positivity can be hurtful. Sorry to say, but I actually have a bioresonance machine that measures the body's states of health and mind. And all my clients who look at the bright side heal way faster than those that talks about their negative emotions all the time. When the machine reads the impact their mental state and what they are thinking impacts their body. It's incredible to see how people who are stuck in trauma and only the bad side of things get themselves sick without even realizing. Also, some people also dump their negativity into others, and they are very comfortable at doing that. Dot, dot, dot. So, really, like, I want you to think about it, and I would really love for you to share, no matter what came up for you. I would really love to know um, how this feels to you. Um, would this comment feel empowering to you? Would it feel motivational to you? Or would it bring up some other sorts of feelings? There is no right or wrong. I really do want to hear, no matter what your opinion is. Because these types of comments, and of course all kinds of other comments, but this type of thing is not uncommon, particularly in the mental health realm, again, and with trauma in particular. There's a lot of this messaging that is present from professionals. Well, some of it actually from professionals, a lot of it from people who are presenting as though they are experts in the field, um, but also from peers or people that create comments that are similar. So I think it's a really important conversation to have in regards to how we as individuals experience the content that we are consuming. And sometimes we can be really aware, like we might read a comment and think, wow, that really bothers me, or that really upsets me, or wow, I'm really feeling something about that. But we may not necessarily recognize why. Or maybe we don't recognize anything at all, but find ourselves feeling kind of flat or irritable or something afterward. Because this kind of stuff, or not just this kind of stuff, but how we interpret things, can make a significant difference in not just how we feel, but again, in terms of what we're internalizing and the impact that that has, because it's reinforcing things. Now, whether it's reinforcing something good or bad depends on your interpretation and experience of it. So let me know in the comments. So when I first started reading this comment, I was open and I was thinking, okay, who is this person? I did notice their YouTube handle, which isn't an actual name or anything. So that's always not necessarily a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with that. But in terms of somebody that would have a bioresonance machine and have clients, that just kind of gave me a little pause for a moment there. But I was open to listening to what they had to say. So if this is not your first video that you've seen of me, you probably have a good sense of how I feel about this comment. So the first thing that kind of stood out to me is the bright side. Most professionals are not going to use that term, generally speaking, when they're talking about their bioresonance machine and their clients. So I'm talking about this in part because, again, thinking about the information that you're consuming and what is the source of the information that you're consuming. And I've talked about that many times. It is important, and I do want to just kind of reiterate that here. It is so important to think about who it is that you're taking this information from. Peer support, peer experiences are very, very important and very helpful. But there is a significant difference between what peers and fellow travelers have to say versus the information that you're taking on, that you're consuming, that you're internalizing from somebody that has real professional education and experience and expertise. So those who look at the bright side, now I'm just paraphrasing, heal way faster than those that talk about negative emotions all the time. So we hear this kind of thing a lot, right? In a variety of ways. And it can come sometimes from professionals. And I want to be clear that the way that I think society, and again, some professionals, tend to view people that talk about negative things, negative emotions or feelings or experiences. The vast majority of society, because they are uncomfortable with that, because they don't know what to do with that, believe that that is a bad thing, in part because that's what people have often said throughout history, throughout the years. And there are some professionals who talk in that way as well. But there is a difference, and maybe I'll do a different video on this. I don't know that I've done one before. I think I have actually, but there's a difference between talk about negative emotions all the time and processing emotions or sharing, creating connection, and getting support. There's a huge difference in those versus talking about negative emotions all the time. But what is the message that is sent there in that? Those that talk about negative emotions all the time. So for me, that immediately didn't sit well with me. I kept reading to see where else it was going to go, but that really didn't sit well with me. It's incredible to see how people who are stuck in trauma, also not typically something that a professional who works with trauma survivors is typically going to say, how people who are stuck in trauma and only the bad side of things get themselves sick without even realizing. Now, I'm not going to say that there isn't a correlation between depression and a lot of bad feelings and experiences and medical issues, and certainly physiological effects, because there is very strong correlation there. And some studies show some cause and effect, even particularly with like heart issues and some digestive issues as well. And I've actually talked about that. But stuck in trauma and only the bad side of things. I have a lot of thoughts about that, but that certainly didn't help the case of this comment from my perspective. And then this last part, I would have been done in terms of giving them the benefit of the doubt if they had written more. Also, some people also dump their negativity into others, and they are very comfortable at doing that. I really like, what kind of message does that send to people? And not just trauma survivors, but anybody who is struggling, somebody who has been suicidal. What kind of message does that send? And this person seems like they're purporting that they're somehow some sort of professional in this field. They have a bioresonance machine, which really anybody can buy, but they have clients, right? So just what kind of message is that sending? And the reason that I wanted to talk about this comment, there's a lot of comments I've actually wanted to talk about over the years, But this one, there is such an emphasis on moving away from the so-called negative things, moving out of trauma, and people being stuck in trauma and playing the victim and all of those kinds of things. And it is so infuriating to me. So infuriating to me. It not only is not helpful, it is incredibly dismissive, it is harmful, it is shaming. So I really do want to hear from you, because it's okay if you felt something very different from it. If you took something positive from it, I want to know that. I truly do. Because maybe I need to not be quite so uptight about it. I don't know. But for now, I'm kind of uptight about this sort of thing. So, so again, the thing that I want you to be able to really consider as you are taking in information, wherever that information is, even unfortunately, some news sources, and there are a lot of different news sources, right? We can get news from lots of different places. So wherever you're getting that information from, until you know something about who it is that's sharing it, and know that they are qualified to talk about what is or isn't helpful, what should or shouldn't be done, what modes or experiences can be beneficial, or ones to not do at all, before you follow that advice, please try to understand a little bit more about who the person is that you're taking that information from. And I know that as a consumer, it is really difficult to know who is actually a professional. And in the US, it's pretty standard for the most part. We might have some different like initials behind our name, but it's relatively standard here in the US. But I know in Canada, like social work is different in Canada than it is here. And I think the same is true for probably much of Europe. Doing psychotherapy is different in other countries sometimes than it is here in terms of the qualifications that are needed to do that. Even like nursing or nurse practitioner, like there's a lot of nurse practitioners that I've seen talking about mental health and healing from trauma. And for most people, what is the difference between a nurse practitioner and a nurse? There is a difference, and I don't have enough information. I don't have enough confidence to be able to tell you exactly what that difference is. I know nurse practitioners have more education and training, and they can prescribe medication here in the US anyway. We have physician's assistants, and we have doctors, and I think they're calling physician's assistants doctors, even though maybe they have a PhD. I don't know, but I'm even confused. So it is very confusing. And because the coaching industry has no regulation whatsoever, literally anybody, and I know you've heard me say this before, and I know it's kind of a soapbox that I tend to stand on, but it's not getting any better. It's actually getting worse. The coaching industry, so anybody who refers to themselves as a coach, what qualifies them to be a coach in that area? Now, there are a lot of therapists who are doing coaching, so I'm not at all suggesting that a coach in and of itself is a bad thing. And again, if they are coaching you from a peer perspective, I think that's fine. For example, I have an Etsy shop, and there are coaches that I like follow on social media about growing my Etsy shop. Some of them have, it seems, made a lot of money on Etsy, and some of them are growing their Etsy shop. And when they talk about, I'm growing my Etsy shop and this is what I'm doing, that means something, right? If it's somebody who's saying, I've had my Etsy shop for 10 years and I've grown to over 6 figures, you expect that person to have more understanding, right? That's not always the case, but that is kind of what we as consumers have as an expectation, in a sense, without even necessarily being aware that that is our expectation. So again, peer support, hearing from others and them sharing their own experiences, what worked or didn't work for them, so important. Part of the reason that I think group experiences are so incredibly important for healing. But there is a difference in the information that we consume when we know that we're peer to peer versus experiencing and taking in information from somebody who is an expert in the field. Another example from my own personal experience, I've shared this a little bit, so I don't think it'll be a surprise to most people. I have been on this whole menopause journey, and I've been thinking about doing a video on menopause and trauma, mental health. And I know that while I have gone through my own experience of menopause, and through that, learning a lot about it, learning about what's helpful and what isn't, and things to try and things not to try, and all of that, I've followed people that doctors that talk about menopause and symptomology and all of that kind of thing. I have an endocrinologist, like I talk to a lot of people about this, but I know that I am not an expert. This is not something that I have the knowledge base to be able to tell other people what is beneficial or not beneficial, or what is the right thing or the wrong thing. I can talk about my experience. I can talk about what was beneficial to me or what wasn't beneficial to me, but I'm going to share that from, I'm just another person on this journey, not I am somebody with expertise that is trying to educate you. So I hope that that feels helpful to you. I'm not trying to disparage anybody. And I don't think that I don't think that the majority of people set out with intentions to try to mislead people or anything like that. I think honestly, a lot of that comes from the industry itself, of the coaching industry, where they tell people that they're an expert because they went through something. And it is, I am so grateful that there is all this information out there. But unfortunately, there is a lot of misinformation that is out there. A lot. And one of the things that is challenging about mental health is that while there are some studies and there is some research that can back up some things, mental health is such a subjective thing that it's very difficult to measure scientifically. And there could be so many different factors that play into it. Like even if you do like a depression scale, right? And somebody starts medication, yeah, it could be that the medication has helped. And a good study is going to have a placebo, right? An actual study is going to have a placebo. And there is a placebo effect, right? That term placebo effect that exists for a reason. But there also can be other contributing factors that play into that. You know, when you start taking medication, you're typically going to be more consciously aware. You're going to be thinking about things more. You might be more motivated to do some of those other things that are helpful, right? So even certain studies can be, I'm not suggesting that they're not good and that we shouldn't learn from them, but when it comes to mental health, there is a lot that is very subjective. And so having the experience, the professional experience, I do think is incredibly important. Just as if you are having any sort of medical issue, seeing a medical doctor is incredibly important. Incredibly important. So if you haven't yet, please make sure to share your thoughts and your reactions to the comment that I read out loud. And I'd also really love to hear from you in terms of your experience on, again, social media in particular, of things that maybe you've heard people say, or things that maybe you have internalized and have left you, well, maybe wasn't all that helpful after all. Because I think this is a really important conversation that a lot of people aren't really talking about. I actually saw somebody sharing something about somatic therapy, and it was a coach, and there were a lot of comments in there about one specific thing that was really beneficial that she said, and I don't doubt that. I don't think that those people are lying, but there is so much nuance, and even when something can be helpful in a moment, it doesn't mean it's going to be helpful in the long term. And sometimes things, when it comes to emotional well-being, that can be really helpful in the moment, like that glass of wine, can end up being detrimental in the bigger picture. Don't think that there's necessarily anything wrong with a glass of wine, but anything that we are using for coping that makes us feel bad in some way, or that we have to rely on, that's outside of ourselves, probably not the best way of coping. Thank you for being here. Really, please share your thoughts in the comments. I'll look forward to seeing you next time.